Hello everybody, my name is Alima Besenova and I'm going to teach Introduction to Sociocultural Anthropology, Anthropology 110. This semester, unfortunately, the course is going to be online again, and we're going to structure it the following way. On Wednesday, I'm going to deliver my video lecture pre-recorded on Moodle or on YouTube. We'll see how it goes. And on Friday, we will come together on Zoom and have a Q&A session, and then we'll break into 4 groups of by 25 students. My teaching assistants will lead discussions. Andrei Sherbakov, Alina Nurtas, and Karina Matkarimova will help me lead discussions. So each of them will take a group of 25 students, and I will also take myself a group of 25 students for discussion. So in today's lecture, we're going to do 3 things. First, we're going to go through the syllabus, and I will explain you the logic of the syllabus and why we have certain readings in it. Second, we will talk briefly about the discipline of anthropology, the discipline of sociocultural anthropology, the history of its formation in the American tradition, in the Western tradition, and also the history of its formation in the Russian imperial and Soviet tradition. And finally, we are going to talk about the topic of the week, which is tradition and modernity, and intellectual opposition between the tradition and modernity, which characterized the most of the 20th century in Kazakhstan and in a larger world. And we will talk about how this opposition, like the constructing of opposition between tradition and modernity, has been problematic for our history and continues to be problematic. So let us go through the syllabus first. This week you are assigned to read 2 articles. The first article of Oksana Ismailbekova, Constructing the Authority of Women Through Custom, Bulak Village in Kyrgyzstan. And I'm going to talk briefly about this article later in the lecture. It's one of my favorite articles on contemporary Central Asia, and it talks about how women gain power in a patriarchal environment of Kyrgyz village through tradition, through following tradition, and how they gain authority by following tradition. Then we're going to read Laura Olson and Svetlana Adonyeva's «Советские крестьянки. Половозрастная идентичность. Структура и история». So these authors, this is also a very contemporary article published in 2016. And it also deals with the similar issues that Oksana Ismailbekova deals in her article of how tradition changed and how, or in the case of the Russian village, even how tradition was broken and how women of different generations
It's 12 hours.
relate differently to what used to be a tradition in their village. So this is for this week, and for the second week we are going to read 2 books, excerpts from 2 books in Russian. And the first book is Shadrina Anna «Не замужем. Секс, любовь и семья за пределами брака». This is a book that deals with the issues of change in the family structure in Russia and Belarus in particular, and the rise of unmarried women. It's not only the rise of unmarried people in general, but particularly the rise of the phenomenon of unmarried women, and how we should rethink our ideas of family, our ideas of kinship in relation to this new way of life of being не замужем. or outside of marriage, unmarried. And we will also read an excerpt from a well-known book in Russia. It's called "Гендер для чайников." It's the authors are Igor Kohn and Anna Temkina, and they are talking about something related to the topic of the first book, "Не замужем." They're talking about the change of sexuality and the homosexualis и современность, закончилась ли сексуальная революция. So what if we consider that sexual revolution happened in the 60s in the West, and sexual revolution is connected with sort of sexual behavior within marriage and outside marriage, with contraception and overall, again, way of life in a family or without a family. And they discussed when this sexual revolution reached Russia, and if we're still, or Russia, is Russia still, and of course Kazakhstan situation is similar, although not always the same as in Russia, whether we are still living through sexual revolution in Russia. The same week, we are going to read two articles that deal with Kazakh or Kazakhstani masculinity. And the first article by Eva Keskula, Oasis in the Steppe, Health and Masculinity of Kazakhstani Minors. It's again the discussion of how the ideas of manhood are changing with new realities. And the new realities in Karaganda that Eva Keskula is describing is the changes to structure of minds, the fact that minors are no longer the aristocracy of the proletariat as they used to be in the Soviet Union, that their pay, even though it's adequate, but of course it has been decreasing, and overall their status as minors has been on decrease, and how they deal with it. And the second article by Ulan Bigozhin, Where is Our Honor? It's about the masculinity, the new masculinity of kind of connected with sports and authority of Muslim men, how sort of Muslim men show their masculinity not only through following Islam and being religious, but also they have to perform in the sports and show their masculinity and achievements as a manifestation of their spirit in this sense. Then in the third week, we will start Ethnographies of Kazakhstan, and we will go back in time and start Ethnographies of Kazakhstan from the 19th century. We will read Alexei Levshin's book «Описание киргиз-кайсачих или киргиз-кайсацких орд и степей», and we will also read Чукан Валиханов's his two famous pieces «Дневник с поездки на Иссык-Куль» и «Описание пути в Кашгар и обратно». And when we also when we read these three pieces, we will discuss the role of ethnographer and the role of ethnographer's subjectivity in producing certain kind of knowledge, how ethnographer's own subjectivity influences what kind of knowledge he can, what kind of information he can have access to, and what kind of knowledge he can produce in the end. And of course it's evident when we compare Levshin and Valikhanov, and the Valikhanov, as we know, capitalized tremendously on his identity as a native, and as one who looks as a native, when he went to Kashgar and collected all of these materials which were not available to the people of, let's say, European descent. We will continue ethnographies of Kazakhstan with гинс в киргизских аулах, очерки из поездки по Семиречью. And this week we will also read Бауыржан Момышұлы's book Наша семья. Бауыржан Момышұлы's book is of course not ethnography, but we will look at how ethnography written by like outsiders or Russian officers, and like all of them, Levshin, Valikhanov, Gins, were like Russian officers and part of the imperial administration. How it can be different. Excuse me. How it can be different when the same subject is addressed by a native writing his memoirs. And Baužan Momышұлы, he's writing his memoirs about how Kazakh tradition used to be before the revolution and how he remembers it. And he's writing it in the 50s. Then we will also read Ethnographies of Kazakhstan, Овцеводство в степном крае by Alihan Bukikhanov. And we will, to compare овцеводство in the beginning of the 20th century with the овцеводство in the beginning of the 21st century, we will read an article by my colleague Gabriel Maguire, by Coin or by Kine, Barter and Pastoral Production in Kazakhstan, where he discusses sheep farming in the beginning of the 21st century in the Jambul region. So we are coming to the ethnographies of Kazakhstan, to the contemporary ethnographies of Kazakhstan in week 5. We're going to read articles by Saule Shisenova and Roots of Kazakh Identity, and an article by myself about called The Fortress and the Frontier, Mobility, Class and Culture in Almaty and Astana. And in these articles, Saulesh and I, we two articles, two separate articles, but we discuss similar things. We discuss the socio-cultural division within Kazakh society based on language, based on origin meaning village, the village or the countryside or the city, and how this socio-cultural division has been formed during the Soviet Union, the Soviet time, and how they persist in the post-Soviet period. We will also read 2 articles on shopping centers by Mateusz Lachkovsky and Jager Philip. Mateusz Lachkovsky article is about Mega Mall in Astana, which is now no longer Mega Mall, but I think Korean city, and the article by Philip Jager about, again, Mega Mall in Aktyubinsk, in Aktobe. And both of these articles, they deal with sort of the role of shopping, like mega mall shopping centers in contemporary Kazakh society, and what they do, and the consumer practices and the urban practices of the contemporary Kazakh society in the contemporary Kazakh society. Then in week 6, we are going to read several, an article by Terence Turner, The Social Skin. It's an article about Brazilian Native Americans in Brasilia, Kayapo, the tribe of Kayapo, who have this particular very vivid way of presenting themselves, and this is a tribe that has managed to preserve its culture and its way of life, despite even in the 21st century, and go viral in terms of its representation and so on. It preserved its land, it's preserved its language and culture. So how we'll discuss how it is possible and how and some of the theoretical insights into what does it mean to be dressed, what does it mean to be social in terms of one's dressing practices. We will also read contemporary ethnography of Manhattan, which is called Primates of Park Avenue. And the author, Wednesday Martin, I like her because she approaches like very modern, household in Manhattan, very modern women who have children in Manhattan, but she approaches it as a, traditional anthropologists used to approach islanders in some distant exotic lands, and she looks at it like, what does it mean to be how difficult it is to be a mother in Manhattan, and how much it costs, and how you have to perform your status. And she also talks about competition among women, and how women compete with each other, how they have competed with each other evolutionarily. And this is something that is not talked about much, so I think it's a very important insight into us human as a species, and particularly competition, sexual competition between women, among women. In week 7, we will continue to read some classical anthropological texts, and we are going to read Marshall Salins, who is one of the most famous, I guess, contemporary anthropologists, and considered to be a classic. And his work is called The Original Affluent Society, where he argues that the quality of life of the people in the Stone Age was not as bad as we imagine today. They had good nutrition, they had good recreational activities, they were in good shape, and our views of the progress and of modernization should be challenged with this evidence from the quality of life of the Stone Age people. So this article we're going to read with the when reading this article, we're also going to discuss the ideas of progress, like what is progress in terms of technology, what is progress in terms of education, what is progress in terms of the quality of life, and how can we measure progress, and what it brings, and it's connected with our today's topic of modernity and tradition. What does it mean to be modern? Does it mean to have more stuff? Does it mean to have better nutrition? Does it mean to walk less? So all of these things. Does it mean humanization of society? And so on. The same week we're going to read Svetlana Boym's From Cute Soldiers to, this is from her book Nostalgia, on Nostalgia. From Cute Soldiers to Incurable Romantics, as it's again about progress and nostalgia. As much as progress advances, this feeling of nostalgia also increases, and we'll discuss this feeling of nostalgia. In week 8, we will continue to read classical anthropological texts. We will read Evans Pritchard and his famous except from his famous book Witchcraft, Oracles and Magic Among Azande, in which he deals with the religion of Azande, which is a witchcraft, and he kind of counters this view established in the West the view of the witchcraft as a primitive religion, and kind of explains how it makes, or it could make sense in certain cultures where witchcraft as a religion takes a central position in society. The same week, we're also going to read Mary Douglas's Purity and Danger and discuss functional role of religion, and in terms of structuring society around the concept of sacred and profane, pure and contagious, and so on. And this week we're also going to discuss this anthropological, I guess, a view on societies called structural functionalism, which is a classical anthropological contribution to understanding of societies, viewing societies as structures in which are similar to let's say living organism, in which like every part of the structure has its own function and has its own purpose, and that's why it's better not to interfere with if you change like a certain organ within an organism, then it will affect it will create this chain reaction, and we should look into societies and its structure and how the structure functions in its entirety, rather than have this sort of macro view of how certain institutions function in society. Institutions such as religion, such as kinship, such as family, and so on. Then we will have a spring break, and when we return from the spring break, we will start the theme of Ethnographies of Globalization, and we'll read an article by Philip Schroeder and Manja Stefan Emmerich, The Institutionalization of Mobility, about, and one of the, I guess, attributes of globalization is mobility, which I guess we're talking about pre-COVID times, how people can travel and can establish their lives in different parts of the world while maintaining connection with their place of origin and so on. So the trade and education and career could be pursued, like in different places across the globe. And this is what we're going to read about in the articles by Philip Schroeder and Manja Stefan Emmerich, and the article by Vera Skvirska on Russian merchants and on trading of Russian merchants with China. And then from March 15th to March 19th, we will have oral midterm examination. So this will be an oral examination in which I meet with you on Zoom, and we will talk, we will have a conversation for half an hour. I will give you questions, and you will be graded based on this exam. Then we will continue the topic of globalization with ethnographies of China. We will read two famous anthropologists who produced a lot of work on China, Li Zhang and Aiwa Ong, and excerpts from their book Privatizing China. We will also read like the ideas of globalization. That globalization is not something that comes only from the West, but it's also something that can come from the Far East, like in the piece by Zheng Tiantianzheng, Karaoke Bar Hostesses, and Japan, Career Wave in Post-Socialist China. Then we will also read one ethnography of global English in call center services in call centers in India. And the final topic of our course will be religion and modernity, in which we will read several articles and books. And we will again concentrate on Central Asia. We will read David Montgomery's Practicing Islam, Knowledge, Experience and Social Navigation in Kyrgyzstan, and we will read Julian McBrien's, again, a book on religion in Kyrgyzstan, and we will read an article by myself on building a Muslim nation and the role of mosques in structuring life in the life of Muslims in contemporary Kazakhstan. So I noticed that I have talked for 25 minutes, so let me finish here the introduction of the syllabus, and then I will come back with the second lecture in which I discuss the discipline of anthropology and the topic of tradition and modernity. Bye.